The man standing at the Family Feud podium looked like any other contestant, nervous smile, pressed shirt, hope in his eyes. But Steve Harvey noticed something nobody else did. The way Michael Patterson's hands shook wasn't from excitement, it was from exhaustion. The kind that comes from 8 months of sleeping in a car with 2 children, working 3 jobs, and keeping a promise to a woman who would never see him keep it. 3 words would stop the game cold: "We're still homeless." But it wasn't those words that broke Steve Harvey. It was what came after. The reason why, the promise. The wife who made him swear, even as cancer took her voice, that he would never stop fighting for their children, that he would get on that stage, that he would win them a home. Hit subscribe now, because the most powerful part of this story hasn't even started yet. Let me take you back to where this impossible story really began. Not on the Family Feud stage in Atlanta, but in a hospital room in Columbus, Ohio. 9 months earlier, Michael Patterson was 34 years old when his world ended. He'd been a shift supervisor at an automotive parts plant, the kind of solid, dependable job that paid the mortgage and put food on the table. He and his wife Sarah had 2 kids, Sophie, 8, and Marcus, 10, and a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. They weren't rich, far from it, but they were happy. Then came the diagnosis: stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Sarah Patterson was 32 years old. The doctors gave her 6 months. She lasted 11, and every single day of those 11 months, Michael fought like hell to save her. He took out loans, he remortgaged the house, he worked overtime until his hands bled. He tried experimental treatments that weren't covered by insurance. He drove Sarah to specialists in 3 different states, burning through savings and retirement funds. Nothing worked. The cancer took Sarah's strength first, then her ability to eat, then her voice. By the end, she could barely whisper. But Michael never stopped trying. The miracle never came. What did come was medical debt, $347,000 worth. The bank foreclosed on their house 6 weeks before Sarah died. Michael moved his family into a cheap motel, but even that became impossible. $40 a night adds up fast when you're feeding 2 kids. That's how the Patterson family ended up living in a 2004 Honda Civic. Michael would park behind a 24-hour Walmart, where security guards knew them and looked the other way. Sophie and Marcus slept in the back seat, curled around each other. Michael slept in the driver's seat, his neck aching every morning. He'd set his alarm for 4:30 a.m., drive the kids to the YMCA, where they'd shower, then drop them off at school before heading to the first of his 3 jobs. Warehouse work from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., pizza delivery from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m., office cleaning from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. He slept in 90-minute increments. He ate 1 meal a day, saving everything else for Sophie and Marcus. He smiled when they asked about getting a house again. He lied and said soon. But here's what nobody knew. In that front seat, surrounded by sleeping bags and a portable cooler that served as their refrigerator, Michael kept one thing that wasn't practical or useful. He kept the Family Feud application that Sarah had filled out 14 months earlier. She'd done it on a whim, during one of her good days between chemo treatments. Family Feud was her favorite show. She'd watch it every night at 7 p.m., calling out answers, laughing at ridiculous responses, telling Michael their family could totally win if they ever got on. "We should apply," she'd said one evening. "Yeah? You think we got what it takes?" "I know we do," Sarah insisted. "Promise me something, Michael. Promise me that if we get picked, you'll go. Even if I can't be there, promise me you'll take the kids and show everyone what the Patterson family is made of." Michael had promised. Back then, he couldn't imagine a world where Sarah wouldn't be there. 3 weeks before Sarah died, the letter came. The Patterson family had been selected for Family Feud. Taping date, 8 months from now. Atlanta, Georgia. Sarah could barely hold the letter, but she gripped it with everything she had. Her eyes lit up with something Michael hadn't seen in months. Joy. "You're going," she whispered. "Sarah, I can't." "You promised," she interrupted. "Michael Anthony Patterson, you look at me, you're going to take our babies, you're going to win, you're going to get them a home. Promise me, say it." Michael was crying. "I promise." "Say it like you mean it." "I promise, I'll go, I'll win, I'll get them a home." Sarah smiled then. Really smiled, and it was the last smile he'd ever see on her face. She died 19 days later, the Family Feud letter folded in her hands. So here's the truth about why Michael Patterson was standing on that stage, hands shaking, wearing a shirt he'd pressed in a gas station bathroom. He wasn't there for fun. He was there because he'd made a promise to a dying woman, and keeping that promise was the only thing holding him together. The Family Feud studio in Atlanta was everything Michael remembered from watching with Sarah: the bright lights, the iconic logo, the energy of 200 audience members, and Steve Harvey, larger than life, working the crowd with that signature warmth. Michael had driven 11 hours from Ohio. He'd slept in the Walmart parking lot the night before, then splurged on a motel room so Sophie and Marcus could shower. His sister-in-law had come to complete the family team. The Patterson family was competing against the Rodriguez family from Miami. Steve started with his usual introductions, working down the line, making jokes, getting to know each contestant. When he got to Michael, he flashed that famous smile. "And you must be Michael Patterson, the captain. Tell me about yourself, man. What do you do?" Michael's hands were shaking. "I work a few different jobs, Steve. Warehouse work, delivery driver, some cleaning, whatever keeps food on the table." Steve nodded. "A working man. I respect that. And who are these beautiful children?" "This is my daughter Sophie. She's 8. And my son Marcus, he's 10. "Hey there, Sophie and Marcus." Steve waved. Both children waved back, but there was something in their eyes that Steve Harvey recognized immediately. These weren't kids excited about being on TV. These were tired kids, really tired. "So Michael," Steve continued, "what are you going to do with the prize money if you win today?" This was the moment. Most people said something funny or practical. "Pay off the car, take the family to Disney." Michael opened his mouth, closed it. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "We're going to get a home." The audience made that sympathetic sound they always made, but Steve Harvey paused. There was something about the way Michael said, "Get a home," that made Steve look at him more closely. "A home? That's a beautiful goal, brother." Michael nodded, not trusting himself to say more. Steve was about to move on when Sophie tugged on her father's shirt. "Daddy," she whispered, but the microphones picked it up. "Daddy, can I tell him?" Michael's face went pale. "Sophie, not now." But Sophie had already turned to Steve with the brutal honesty only children possess. "Mr. Steve, we live in our car. Daddy wants to win so we don't have to sleep in the parking lot anymore." The studio went silent. Not normal game show silence. This was different. This was 200 people collectively holding their breath. Steve Harvey stopped mid-movement. His smile faded. He looked at Sophie, then at Marcus, then at Michael. "What did you just say, baby girl?" Steve's voice was soft now, stripped of all performance. Sophie looked up at her father. Michael's eyes were closed, his jaw clenched. This was the shame he'd carried for 8 months, now exposed on national television. "We live in our car," Sophie repeated. "We've been living there since Mommy died, but Daddy says it's okay because Mommy is watching over us and we're going to win and get a house like she wanted." Steve Harvey has hosted Family Feud since 2010. He'd seen thousands of contestants, heard hundreds of sad stories. He'd learned to be compassionate but professional, keep the show moving. But something about Sophie's words hit Steve Harvey like a physical blow. The matter-of-fact way she said, "since Mommy died." The casual mention of sleeping in parking lots. The complete absence of self-pity. He set his cards down. Then he walked away from his mark, breaking protocol, and went directly to Michael Patterson. "Brother," Steve said quietly, "is that true?" Michael couldn't look at him. He nodded once. "How long?" 8 months. "And your wife?" "She died from cancer. 9 months ago, we lost everything trying to save her. The house, the savings, everything. I work 3 jobs, but I can't get enough together for first month, last month, and deposit. Not while feeding the kids. I just need one break." The audience wasn't making a sound. The production crew had stopped giving directions. Everyone was frozen. Steve turned to the Rodriguez family. "Folks, I need to ask you something. Would you mind if we stop this game right here?" Carlos Rodriguez didn't hesitate. "Steve, you do whatever this family needs." Steve nodded. Then he did something unprecedented. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet. "Michael," Steve said, his voice audible throughout the silent studio, "I need you to listen very carefully. What I'm about to do, I'm not doing for the cameras. I'm doing this because your wife made you promise something, and I'm going to help you keep that promise. Steve pulled out his personal credit card. This card? I'm giving you the number. You're going to book your family into a hotel tonight. A real hotel. With real beds. You understand me? Michael shook his head. Steve, I can't. You're not taking charity, Steve interrupted. You're accepting help from someone who understands. I've been where you are, brother. I lived in my car for 3 years when I was starting out in comedy. I know what it's like to wash your face in a gas station bathroom. I know what it's like to tell your kids that camping in the car is an adventure when you just don't have anywhere else to go. The tears Michael had been holding back for 8 months started falling. But here's what I also know, Steve continued. You're not going to be homeless after today. We're going to play this game. You're going to win. And then I'm going to make some calls to people I know in Columbus, Ohio. We're going to find your family a home. Steve turned to the entire studio. You know what we're going to do? Both families are going to play together. Every point scored goes to the Patterson family. Whatever they win today, that's their seed money. That's their fresh start. The audience erupted, but Steve wasn't done. He took off his suit jacket, the same jacket he wore for every taping, and wrapped it around Michael's shoulders. Your wife, Sarah, Steve said softly. She knew you'd keep that promise, and so do I. You wear this jacket, you stand tall, and you show everyone watching what a man who keeps his promises looks like. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. What happened next wasn't television. It was a community coming together around one family's pain. Both families stood together at one podium. Steve abandoned the traditional format. He asked questions. Everyone called out answers, and it didn't matter who said what. When Steve asked, name something that makes a house a home, Marcus said family, and scored number one. When he asked, name something worth fighting for, Sophie said, promises, and brought the studio to tears. When he asked, name something that never runs out, Michael said, love, and Steve had to turn away from the camera. By the end of that episode, the combined families had won $32,000, but that wasn't what made headlines. What made headlines was what happened after the taping ended. Steve Harvey spent 45 minutes on his phone while the Patterson family waited in the green room. He called his real estate agent in Columbus, his charitable foundation, a furniture company he'd partnered with, a local grocery store chain. When he walked back into that green room, Steve Harvey had secured something that money alone couldn't buy, a 3-bedroom house in Columbus, Ohio. First month's rent paid, last month's rent paid, security deposit paid, furniture donated, kitchen stocked, utilities on, and more. Michael Patterson had 3 job interviews lined up with companies Steve's foundation worked with, real jobs. Single jobs that paid enough that a man didn't have to work himself to death. Michael collapsed, not from exhaustion, from relief, from the weight of 8 months finally lifting. You kept your promise, Steve told him. Now let me keep mine. The episode aired 3 months later and became the most watched Family Feud in history. Over 12 million people watched Michael Patterson break down on television. Over 12 million people heard about Sarah's dying wish. Over 12 million people saw Steve Harvey prove that sometimes the most important thing you can do is show up for another human being. But more importantly, the episode sparked something bigger. Donations poured into Steve Harvey's foundation, over $2.3 million for families facing homelessness after medical crises. The Sarah Patterson Promise Fund was established to help families keep promises to dying loved ones. 3 national hotel chains started programs offering free temporary housing. 2 automotive companies began providing reliable vehicles to families living in their cars. Medical debt advocates used Michael's story to push for healthcare reform. Michael got one of those interviews. Steve set up. He's now a logistics coordinator, making $58,000 a year with full benefits. He moved his family into that 3-bedroom house, and they're still there today, 2 years later. Sophie is 10 now, on her roll at school. She sleeps in a bedroom with pink walls and a bookshelf full of books. Steve's foundation donated. She wants to be a doctor to help people like her mom. Marcus is 12, basketball team, best friend 3 houses down. He doesn't remember much about living in the car, and Michael is grateful for that. Michael still keeps that Family Feud letter framed in his living room next to Sarah's photo. Under it, a small plaque, "Promise is kept." Every year on the anniversary, Steve receives a text from Michael. Always the same 3 words, "We're still home." And every year Steve replies with 4, "I knew you would be." The suit jacket Steve gave Michael hung in his closet for 6 months before he tried to return it. When he drove back to Atlanta to hand-deliver it during another taping, Steve refused. "That jacket has been with me for every episode since 2010, Steve said, "but it never meant more than the day I put it on your shoulders. You keep it, pass it down to Marcus. Let it remind your family that promises matter, that hope matters. That sometimes when you think you've lost everything, you're about to gain everything that really counts." Michael still has that jacket. He wore it to Sophie's 5th grade graduation, Marcus's first basketball game. He'll wear it to their high school graduations, college graduations, weddings. Someday, when Michael is old and his children have children, he'll tell them about the day he stood on a game show stage with nothing but a promise and a prayer, about his daughter's honesty breaking through his shame, about a television host becoming an angel in a perfectly tailored suit. He'll tell them about Sarah, about the woman who never gave up, about the promise she made him make, about her belief that love could overcome anything. And he'll tell them what he learned when Steve Harvey reached into his wallet and changed everything. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you need help. Sometimes the strongest thing is keeping a promise when it seems impossible. And sometimes the world sends you exactly the person you need exactly when you need them most. Steve Harvey says Michael's episode changed how he approaches Family Feud. "I realized that day my job isn't to host a game show. My job is to be present for people's stories. Sometimes the game is just the excuse that gets them to the place where they can be seen." The producers kept every second of raw footage, over 90 minutes, 3 times a normal episode's length. They've never released the full version, but those who've seen it describe it as one of the most powerful pieces of unscripted television ever recorded. Michael speaks at churches and community centers now, telling his story to families facing impossible situations. He always ends the same way: "Your circumstances don't define you. Your promises do. Keep them, no matter what." Sophie and Marcus don't remember much about the car, but they remember Family Feud, Steve Harvey hugging their father, feeling for the first time in months like everything would be okay. Sarah's been gone over 2 years, but her presence is everywhere in that 3-bedroom house, in photos on walls, in the way Michael sets a place for her at holidays, in the promises kept. The empty seat Michael leaves for her at family dinners isn't sad anymore, it's sacred. A reminder that love doesn't end when life does, that promises transcend death, that sometimes the people we lose give us strength to become who we were meant to be. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Because this isn't just about a game show. This isn't just about a homeless family, or a generous host, or a promise made in a hospital room. This is about what happens when we choose to see each other, really see each other, when we look past the pressed shirts and nervous smiles and recognize the exhaustion underneath. This is about Steve Harvey understanding that some moments matter more than entertainment, that some promises matter more than protocol, that some people need more than money. They need to be reminded they're not alone. And this is about Michael Patterson proving that a promise made to a dying wife isn't just words, it's a compass, a North Star, the thing that keeps you going when every reasonable person would say it's okay to give up. Sarah never got to see her family on Family Feud. Never saw them win, never saw them move into that house with 3 bedrooms and pink walls in Sophie's room. But in a way, she did. Because she believed it into existence, she made Michael promise, and that promise became the thread that held everything together until help arrived. So the next time you're tempted to break a promise because keeping it seems too hard, remember Michael Patterson, the man who lived in a car for 8 months because he gave his word to a dying woman. Remember that promises aren't just made with our mouths, they're kept with our actions, our choices, our willingness to keep going when giving up would be easier. And remember that somewhere right now, there's someone just like Michael, someone trying to keep a promise against impossible odds, someone living in their car working 3 jobs, telling their kids everything will be okay even though they're not sure they believe it. Maybe that someone is you. If it is, know this: your promise matters, your struggle matters, you matter. And sometimes, when you least expect it, the world will send you a Steve Harvey. Not necessarily a famous or wealthy person, but someone who sees you, someone who stops the show, someone who reaches into their wallet and says, "You're not alone anymore." Until then, keep the promise. Whatever it is, whoever you made it to, keep it. Because that's what love looks like. That's what courage sounds like. And that's what happens when a father refuses to give up on a promise he made to the woman who made him believe in promises in the first place.